Hello, my name is Monique Holland, and I am presenting to you the story of Cadet Private Keith Nolan, a soldier with a capital D. He has shared his perspective through TED Talks and social media, and here I'm going to share those experiences. Nolan lives in California and has been attending CSUN, California State University. It is here that he has joined the ROTC program. He has had a strong passion for military history and a strong connection through serving family members. His time spent in the ROTC program has been a roller coaster of triumph and opportunity. The ride continued as he reached the third level of ROTC. The fact is, Keith Nolan is deaf and cannot pass the required hearing exam, and his experience is about to come to an end. Before we go any further, there is a new consciousness in deaf culture and society that you need to know. That is the distinction between lowercase d and capital D in deaf. Lowercase d is referring to the physical measurable hearing levels, whereas deaf with a capital D is a sociological and cultural identity reference. Keith Nolan is deaf with a capital D. He uses ASL, American Sign Language, as his main source of communication. He also holds a strong pride to both his culture and his country, and the idea to be all that you can be. Nolan has always had a longing to join the military. He remembers after graduating high school going to a naval recruiting office. He approached a strapping naval man, and after speaking, Nolan had to stop him and explain that he could not read his lips and that he is deaf. That man simply then wrote on a piece of paper, "Bad ear disqual," not spelling out the word disqualified. After turning to a variety of other locations and getting the same results and rejection, he became a teacher for the deaf for the next few years. But then three things happened that re-sparked his passion. The first trigger was as a teacher, a student approached him after learning about the Mexican-American War, asking how he could enlist. Shocked, Nolan told him, "You can't, you're deaf." He was astonished to be a part of the same oppression that holds back the deaf community and has been holding himself back. The second trigger happened after a friend informed him that the deaf serve in the Israeli Defense Forces. This inspired him to research and conduct a 98-page thesis on the already historical success of deaf in the military. Here I am going to borrow the words of Tom Humphreys, another notable member and scholar in the deaf community, to elaborate on the historical reference. 1900 to 1945 was one of a hunger for equality. The same year was also a feast of change. The end of World War II saw middle-class white deaf people with a taste for better and greater participation in the benefits of the economic growth of the U.S. They had been called to serve their country, mostly on the home front, but in positions previously denied to them. However, society was ready to see them again disappear from the scene as hearing soldiers returned home. One of the most difficult tasks deaf people faced when talking up ASL and deaf culture during the 1970s and 1980s was to compel hearing people to take notice and address the disparity between the new consciousness that deaf people had acquired and the old beliefs that people who hear still harbored about deaf people. Clearly, deaf people were not limited in either intellect or capability, yet some very obvious injustices grated on deaf people. Nolan emphasizes deaf capability in his thesis and argues in response to communication barriers. Seriously, no magic wand needed, not necessary to have an interpreter by their side. He adds and continues, "Military retains their disabled soldiers. Why can they not accept disabled citizens as well, especially when, moreover, out of all jobs, 80% are non-combat?" Nolan himself wishes to join military intelligence. The third trigger happened after CSUN started up their own ROTC program. Eager and optimistic, Nolan joined the program. A little shocked at first, this was the first opportunity given and unprecedented in his experiences. He finally got his foot in the door. It was slow and awkward at first, and this was the first time for the battalion to have a deaf cadet, and took some adjusting. This was a whole new world for both of them. The military has its own jargon and culture, just as the deaf world does. This assimilation, however, didn't take long. In the beginning, he was only allowed to observe and audit the classes as a bystander in civilian dress. But he showed up all the same. Every morning for PT, which is physical training, every Friday lab field training, and every weekend training that included actual military-based training. He soaked it all in, anything and all that he can get. Still, it wasn't quite enough. During watching drill commands, he pushed forward and asked again, "Can I join?" He was thrilled to get another go-ahead. He rushed to the second line, ready to watch and follow the commands. However, the one who opened the door for him to join stopped him, yelling, "Hey, I want you in front. You want to be a soldier? You learn the commands just like everyone else." Nolan was inspired. This was the first he was viewed as a person with dignity. His quoted 110% effort soon earned him a uniform and was no longer considered an outsider. Nolan expresses, "I was astonished. I have to tell you, each morning I get up and put on my uniform, I feel privileged. It's truly an honor to wear the uniform." And that's basically how events started to unfold. Slowly by slowly, he was doing more and more. Here you can see some images of his experience. I'd like to emphasize on the image here on the far right, where he is wearing his German Armed Forces Proficiency Badge. His battalion traveled to Vegas to participate in the German physical training. He passed them all. Not only was he able to participate, but he exceeded expectations. It was a huge honor, and obviously, as you can see, he wears his uniform proudly. Nolan has gained a huge support and a fierce connection. The respect gained for each other can be groundbreaking. As can happen in military, they feel as brothers and sisters. One of the most memorable is Lieutenant Colonel Phelps, of which Nolan has given a name sign, which in deaf culture expresses a strong reflection of a bond and may only be given by a member. Nolan explains this bond stating, "He is the commanding officer of the entire Bruin battalion. Every time I see him walk by, it's inspiring. The way that he presents himself, you can see he's the epitome of a soldier. Plus, he doesn't view me as a deaf person. He looks at my skills and capabilities. Instead, he's really pushed for me, and I respect him for all of that." This is where the mood changes. This full speed ahead, gung-ho experience has reached the 3rd level of the ROTC program in fall of 2015. And again, Nolan is deaf, which means no passing the medical exam. It also means no more PT, no more Friday labs, no more base training, no more uniform. That he must also surrender. Everyone is shocked and stands with him to fight to allow him to continue what he has already proved to be capable of doing. But policy is policy. Deaf is disqualified. This is, however, not the end. He reaches out to congressmen and anyone willing to listen to again get the ball rolling. This is happening now. The Keith Nolan Air Force Defense Demonstration Act has been created to demonstrate the capabilities of deaf and hard of hearing individuals. And the National Defense Authorization Act of 2016, which you can view here through this link, argues for an amendment to these existing policies. It is here again I use the words of Tom Humphreys. "We exist in a time of respect and celebration for difference, yet there is an unending drive to repair and replace. Somewhere in our present, among the details of our lives and our history, there must be a way to the future." I end with Nolan's own last words, of which there is a link to see for yourself here, which will link you to his TED Talk. As you watch, consider how you would respond and what it really means to be deaf.